You're listening to the Mind Your Business podcast, episode number 70. Today, we're talking all about how to create your own reality. So, stay tuned. Hi, I'm James Wedmore, and I've built a 7-figure internet business that offers the financial freedom to do what I want, when I want. And I'm the first to say that hard work and hustle are not essential ingredients for your success. So, how do you build a thriving business from the inside out? This is the Mind Your Business podcast, featuring myself and co-host Phoebe Mroczek. All right, listeners, welcome to the call. My name is James Wedmore.
And I'm Phoebe Mroczek.
And this is the Mind Your Business podcast. Thank you so much for tuning in and listening. Appreciate the support. We're here yet again with another episode. I'm excited.
This is going to be a good one to start the new year off right. So at the time of this recording, it is the beginning of January 2017, and we're excited to kick the new year off with something that for me is really exciting and really interesting. And I'm excited to get into this conversation and dig a little deeper into creating our own reality.
I feel like we should change the name of the podcast to Mind Your Life or something, because I feel like every episode we get further and further away from the topic of business. And like rightfully so. I think that's kind of the journey that I went on is, you know, the more seeking of answers I looked for in the realm of marketing and business, the more I found something wasn't working. I felt stuck. The answer wasn't there for me. And so I said, okay, well, what else is available? And there is this like old formula for change, right? Which is what I see in the industry and in the marketplace, which is the concept of information plus motivation equals change, right? Does that make sense? Like I'm going to give you the 7 steps and then a little dose of motivation, and then you're going to change.
Right.
And I think this is what we've all been raised on. I think this is what we're all used to. And we kind of look at it, and for most people, it doesn't work. It's not working. And there's evidence of it everywhere. If you're not happy with your weight, that's a perfect example. It's not like you need any more information. And you've been given motivation, but think about that motivation for a second. It's so fleeting. It's momentary. And this is why we've had an episode in the past about motivation, that like it's this external thing that will give you a little dose for today, but tomorrow you're going to need a new dose. It's kind of like a drug, and you're going to always need more of it. Or look at New Year's resolutions, right? You know, why do we give up on these? And it's become this notorious, infamous thing now that where everyone knows that you might as well not even set a New Year's resolution, because come February, you've given up on it. So that's kind of the traditional route, especially when people are buying an online course or a program. It's like, okay, here's this new information plus a little bit of motivation. Maybe now I'm a little bit more motivated, and now I'm going to change, and all my problems are going to be solved. So I think we've been raised on that, and it doesn't work for most people. People do find evidence of it, but I think what we're really going to talk about in this episode, because that's the struggle that I had. I was like, wait a second, I'm like the smartest person I know, and I can't figure this out. I can't get the results, right? We're all walking around saying, I already know this. I know everything. Why isn't it working? So what if there was something else at play? Those were the questions I really started asking myself years ago, and, I continue to take myself further and further down a rabbit hole. And today we're going to talk about this concept of reality. If it is a concept. I think it is, right? Now, some of us here have heard already things like you create your own reality, or your thoughts create your reality. Phoebe, have you heard that before?
Yeah, thoughts create things.
Thoughts create things, yes. Now, when you first heard that, what was your first response to that?
Well, I'm just going to start thinking all these amazing things, and then it's just going to start coming to me really quickly.
Well, you're more open than most people. A lot of people will just be like, that's hogwash. That's total BS, right? And so I think we want to talk to 2 groups of people here today. I mean, we want to talk to every group, but I think there's the Phoebe camp that was like, really got on board with this, and so they just started thinking all these cool thoughts. And sometimes maybe it worked, and sometimes maybe it didn't. And you're like, so maybe some of my thoughts create reality? And I want to offer that there's something deeper that's going on here. Now, for other people, The other camp that's in the arms folded, crossed, shaking their head naysayers, which totally welcome you because that's where I started, was like, give me a break. What are you talking about? Like, this, it didn't even make sense to me. Is that I want to offer a conversation with you today to present a new perspective where my goal is just by the end of this episode, you can sit there and say, holy cow, your thoughts really do create your reality. And I'm hoping, this is going pretty deep and out there that we can get people to that space because I think it's pretty powerful. Okay, so if we're starting with this premise of do you create your own reality, I think we need to start with a conversation of what is reality. And I think we can all come up with our own definition. Isn't that should be kind of a clue right there, right? That if you asked a bunch of people what reality is, they'd all come up with their own definition that they are certain is truth. And so I just want to point out some things. I just want to kind of have a conversation with you guys. First of all, there's this concept called the law of duality. And I think the best way I can describe the law of duality is that we live in a dualistic universe, is that if you look at everything, there tends to be the opposite of that thing that exists as well. Up and down, love and hate, good and bad, right? As concepts. Now, the fascinating thing is that the beautiful synergistic relationship that these things have, like love and hate and up and down, is that one can't exist without the other, right? So that it takes the other to make the other great. So I always, when I'm in a space that's like more negative than I wish it would be, like if I'm upset or frustrated, I always remind myself that like it's these times, or if I'm sad or something, it's these times that will make me appreciate the good times, the times I'm happy and elated and filled with joy. And isn't that fascinating? It's the same with our emotions. You can't feel a new sense of unprecedented joy if you don't know what anything else looks like on that emotional scale. So we're starting here that there is this concept of the law of duality, that for anything to exist, there must also be not that thing. And if you now look at physical things that are out there, like look at your chair or your desk or whatever's in front of you, you realize that it has boundaries. In this dimension that we're in, things have physical boundaries. So if you're looking at a table, you can see what is the table, and then you can see where is not the table. And this is what we mean by these boundaries. So now what we want to do, if you even just took a moment and looked around the room, wherever you are, or, if you're in your car or something, just drive safe, at all the things that are around you, like steering wheel, chair, desk, all these things that you have that you just know are what they are. Sky, ground, car. Okay, now for a moment, I want to see if you can imagine the external world, the world out there, without any preconceived labels or identifications. Imagine what the world out there would look like if it didn't have these names or these differentiations that you know them to have. It really would be all undifferentiated space. And some could argue that if it doesn't have a label such as chair, that if it doesn't have these labels, then it is what? It's nothing. It's just nothingness. Right? Does that make sense? That at some point in time, we decided that that's what a chair is, that that's what a desk is, and that these things, like the desk or the chair, are not having their own consciousness, that we know of at least, and telling us, I am chair, I am desk. So we could argue physical reality, the reality out there, actually requires our consciousness in order to make these differentiations, these distinctions. Everything out there is only an interpretation that we have given it, but has no inherent meaning. But once you make a distinction and you actually bring it into reality, it becomes very, very challenging, and this is why this conversation becomes hard for people to hear. It becomes very challenging to imagine that thing not existing. Once you've determined that it is so, how can you then imagine it not so? And even when I ask you to imagine what this world would look like without any labels, that could be challenging, right?
Right, because you're like, well, that's a table, but it's not really a table. So if I can imagine it not being a table,
exactly. Yes,
it's tricky.
Yes. What I'm trying to get you to play around with for a bit with me is that this concept of reality could be defined or described as that which a person's, like you or me, their consciousness has already distinguished. Like, this is what they've already decided this means, and this is. You saw an event that what I'm saying is that a chair is not inherently a chair. It is nothing that we have decided, that we have distinguished as chair. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that does make sense. I'm on board. I'm just trying to make sure that I understand what you're saying. And actually, my question is it more difficult because a table has been a table for so long that when you're a kid, this has been kind of implanted inside of you and that's what you're taught? So then you don't really know to think anything else. Is that...
Yes, absolutely. And I think we're using simplistic examples for a reason, because I'm not talking about, at the end of the day, where this is going to be beneficial is not where we change our definitions of what a chair is or not. Right. But when we begin to look at, which is coming, our beliefs. Because, we could say that even just the chair is the belief, that we believe that that's a chair, right? Now, because it's just an interpretation we set as this label. And so where this starts to become valuable, where this can make a lasting impact so that you no longer have to follow that old formula of new information in plus some motivation is finally going to change, is to get to the core of what is shaping our reality if we can prove to you that we create our own reality, which hopefully will get you there. So it happens a little like this. You experience or saw an event. Something happened, right? And then what we do is we create an interpretation. There's, A caused B, and then we create an interpretation from that. And then from that interpretation, we then create a belief. Now, let me give you an example. One example that I love was years ago. This is like 2008, 2009. I was at a Tony Robbins UPW, Unleash the Power Within conference, and he had a woman speak, and it was just unbelievable. Basically, she starts out where he brings her up on stage and everything, and she starts out by saying how she's ready to divorce her husband, and he asks why, and he says, because he betrayed me. And he goes, how did he betray you? And she said, he's carried a lie with him. He's lied to me for the past 20 years. Okay, where does your mind go right there? What are you thinking? How has he betrayed her for the last 20 years? If you could guess the end of this story, what would you guess?
Adultery.
Yeah, that's where the room of 3,000 people, including myself, went like, oh my gosh, he's got another wife somewhere, another family, and he's hid it from her for 20 years. Here's what happened. This was around the time of the housing crash and stuff like that, 2008, 2009. So they had fallen on harder times financially, and he told her, the husband told the wife, it's okay, we're going to be fine. And she goes, how can you say that? And he goes, well, I have an extra bank account that I've been saving an extra $20,000 in that bank account for the last 20 years. And, between you and I think what we found out was that he hid it from her because she has a bit of a shopping problem. So he wanted to just not tell her about it and keep it hidden. So if you look at the event, remember I said, you see an event and then you create interpretation. The event was he saved $20,000 and did not tell her about it. Can we agree that that is what happened?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. What was the interpretation? That he betrayed her. Right? And even as she shares that interpretation, look at where our minds go. Now, is it truth? Is it reality that he betrayed her? No, because I could argue one way and you could argue another way. You could agree that, yes, I think that that is betrayal, but that's still an opinion. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
Okay, that's one interpretation of many. We could even say it is a truth, but is not the truth. The only thing that is the truth is the facts of what happened, that he saved $20,000 in a bank account and did not tell her about it. We can all agree, everyone in the room can agree that that happened, but we can't all, 100% of the population, agree that it's betrayal. And you can't see betrayal, right? Okay, so what happened is she made a meaning or interpretation from these events, and basically that colored or filtered her reality. So she now, looks at him as someone who's betrayed her, right? Okay, so that's what's kind of going on here, right? Is that everything that we say is, out there in the world is really this distinction or differentiation that we create in our mind, especially if it's something that we can't touch, see, taste, or smell, right? And then we put these labels on it, right? As like betrayal, boom. So we are, like, if you look at it like this, just to, take you back for a second, if there is a world out there that does not have any labels or distinctions or differentiations, it's this nothingness, and we are this conscious being who, in our nature, to distinguish and label and put meanings on something. And if we say that reality is something that can be described as that which a person's consciousness has already distinguished, we can then land on, therefore, we do create our reality. Okay, so hopefully that still makes sense. And we're not finished yet. Okay, what I want to do is talk about this concept of beliefs, because this is something that has really been fascinating me of late, and I think this is huge, and I think you're going to see a lot more episodes from us on the conversation of belief, right? That this is what's really going on here, is that we have a belief. You've heard these things before, like, oh, that's a limiting belief. Okay, we have a belief. The problem is that we don't see it as a belief. And I remember actually at that same Tony Robbins event, because I love Tony Robbins, I love his events, I think they're great, but something I really struggled with at that event is he'd have you say, like, write down all your limiting beliefs. I was struggling the most in my business when I went there, and I had the hardest time in the world doing that. Why? Because you don't walk around with a knowingness of your beliefs. They're not beliefs to you, they are the truth. And the average person doesn't walk around questioning things like gravity and the color of the sky. They just are what they are, and we go about our business. Instead, we look at things like our behavior and our attitudes, right? And what you'll see here is that it's our beliefs that are shaping our behaviors and actions, okay? So a belief is simply a statement about reality that you think is the truth versus just a truth, right? It's like when we go back to that, you saw an event, you created an interpretation or a belief, and what happens is, especially when we're younger, there's this whole conversation we won't get into today about how all these beliefs we form from the ages of like 3 to 6. The problem is these become vastly universal beliefs. It's not like, for the example, like he betrayed me, my husband betrayed me. It's like all men betray women or all men betray me, right? It's these huge, universally blanketing beliefs that we create as truth. And then we run our lives and we operate from those as facts. It literally colors how we see and experience and interpret the world outside of us. Okay? So, and then of course, another way to look at belief is what Abraham Hicks describes as is a belief is simply a thought you keep thinking. Okay? So I think their definition here is a little simplistic because I think you're thinking it at the subconscious level, but you don't think it like you think a thought. That's been my experience. Like when I look at a belief, I don't feel like I'm walking around thinking about it. I feel like it's there as a knowingness. You know what I mean?
You're not sitting there like, oh, life is hard. You have to, all these things.
Look at me, think about how hard life is. It's kind of just like, it's almost like you're sitting there going like, since life is so hard, I should probably, work longer, right? You're not even realizing it's a thought. And that's where this gets tricky. And that's where, again, back to the beginning, like someone giving you more information plus a little motivation, it seems to keep most people stuck, not changing, right? But I believe that if we can start looking at these beliefs, then we can have a real lasting change and impact in our life. Now, okay, as we said before, we have this thing called reality, which is made up of our interpretations. And basically, I want to say that your beliefs are these interpretations, right? Your beliefs are interpretations that we make based on how we observe certain events. Right. And like I said, a lot of things that happen to us when we're younger make these big conclusions about our identity as a person. Right. Like, some of you guys have heard this before. We'll have other episodes deeper on this thing, but things like I'm not enough, I'm not worthy, I'm not loved. Or these kind of like contingency ones, right? Like I'm only good enough if this. That's what I find very fascinating, right? Like that's what drives a lot of entrepreneurs. Like I'm only valuable or worthy when I succeed or when I get acknowledged or when this, right? And these things don't feel like beliefs. And I feel like most people do not just walk around saying that as an affirmation. It's literally just what is truth. It's just the truth. And if you could sit with that for a minute, you can start to see what someone with something like that as a truth for them, not a belief. Again, that's the fascinating thing here that I really want to distinguish is that it's not a belief when it's yours. It's true. So what would someone's life look like if it said I'm only worthy when I'm the best or when I'm accomplishing or when I achieve? Their whole life is going to be run by that. That when they're not achieving, when they're not acknowledged or accomplished, then something's wrong with them. Then they're upset or depressed and they overwork. They become a workaholic. Other things in their life no longer matter. Family, friends, because it's all about this, goal to fix themselves, right? So then when someone comes around with other information, like that formula, information plus motivation equals change, if it doesn't match that model, if it doesn't line up with this truth, the truth, then it becomes useless. Because what happens is that once you have that belief as truth, it becomes this self-fulfilling prophecy. Okay? So it's a lens through which you see the world now, that you only find evidence to support that, right? And that's what makes it so hard. You only find evidence to support it. So if you say life, like we talked about this on another episode, life is tough, you're only going to find evidence that life is tough. So if that's all you see is examples of life being tough, and then someone like this jackass on a podcast comes out and says, is it, or is that just a belief? You say, screw you, I have 150 examples of life being tough. You'll never or rarely find evidence to the contrary. And that's where this gets so challenging. And then, of course, someone gives you a 7-step formula for making life easy, and it will completely threaten and contradict the belief that's already there as truth. So is this making sense?
It is. And this is I did a whole process a couple months ago where it went back to an interpretation that I had when my mom didn't pick me up on time, or she didn't make my ballet recital when I was 5 years old. And I created this interpretation that I was not important. I was like, oh my gosh, I did that. I was the one who said that, and now looking at, she was probably about my age when she had me, and that just wasn't her fault. Maybe she was running late. There are lots of us, who knows what could have been the reason, but I created that truth. So now that, as part of what you're saying is like, now that's the truth that I have been living in. And that's the lens through which I observe and interpret everything. And I'm always looking for proof, like, oh, well, see, I'm not important. So-and-so didn't talk to me. Well, that's because I'm not important. And so I can kind of see the way that this becomes my truth. and how difficult it is. And when you're saying, when you mentioned the Tony Robbins, like write down all your limiting beliefs, it's so funny because you operate as though, the background music, it starts to like drown out. You don't even hear it anymore.
Absolutely. Especially because we're talking 30 years of your life with that, right?
Right. Mm-hmm.
So if we say that your behavior becomes consistent with your beliefs, if we're looking for the belief, you're not going to find it. Okay. And if you're like, no, I know I have a limiting belief around this. I hear people, especially with this podcast, people tell me that all the time, like, oh, I have a limiting belief on that. Chances are you didn't find it. Someone either told you about it or, you kind of just jump to that conclusion, right? But there is I guarantee you, if you're walking around with that level of awareness that you have that belief, there's a deeper one that you just don't know about. We've all got them, and it doesn't make you wrong or bad. It really doesn't. But if your behavior is consistent with your beliefs, we don't go around looking for the belief because that's going to be really hard. You look at the behavior. The behavior then becomes the clue or the indicator to the belief that is driving that behavior. We walk around saying, oh yeah, I'm such a procrastinator. Or, oh my gosh, I am such a hothead. We walk around saying, I am all these things, and we never frigging question why we are this way. Oh, I'm so this way. And we just say, well, that's me, and you just give up reserve to say, that's how I am, and that's how my life is. These are examples of behaviors that are being run by beliefs in the background, and we have so many of these. So you look to the undesired, unwanted behavior, and you can begin to uncover what belief may be driving that behavior, okay? But we want to look at this for a second because what's happening here, and again, like further episodes go deeper on this, but that a lot of these beliefs are formed at a very young age. Our minds really are like as a child, like a ball of clay that are being molded, right? So the problem is that once that interpretation like Phoebe just gave, which is just such a perfect example of, what was it? I'm not worthy.
I'm not important.
I'm not important. Yeah. That then, as that becomes truth, that becomes reinstated, in the background for years and years and years and years, right? So what we have to look at, and Phoebe already said this, but we're just going to really demonstrate this for the audience, is did your mom implant that belief in you that you're not important?
No, of course not.
No, she did do something. Mm-hmm. So she could have been a mechanism for it, right? That she did something, as in not pick you up. Now, that's the event. Now, remember where we started in this episode is this crazy conversation I had that if you look out into the world, there is a world that we have put all these, as humans have, with our consciousness, have put all these labels on things. And then if we were to just like start over from scratch today, there would be no labels on it. There would be nothing. Everything would be nothing. And so what we have here is this event that took place, that Phoebe's mom did not pick Phoebe up. Perfect example of nothing. It's just an event of what happened. So then Phoebe said, or determined, because what do kids do? They ask why all the time, right? Why did mom pick me up? So she needs an answer to that, which is because I'm not important. So who created that belief then?
I did.
Yes. Because if you look at it, you weren't born with that belief. Like, we can't possibly, at this point in the episode, sit there and say that when Phoebe was born, the day she arrived on this planet, that she was saying, I'm not important, right? Like, you weren't born with that.
Right.
Right? So you created it. Yeah. And obviously you know that it's a belief that it's not the truth. You could have made it a truth for the time. Were there some other truths that you could have made?
Yeah, definitely.
Give me some examples.
I could have said that, well, if I was standing in that moment, like my mom, she could have hit traffic. She could have, had my other siblings had something running late, and so she wasn't able to make it. Maybe she got the directions wrong. I don't know. Those are some different possibilities. Or, she was busy doing something else, but it said nothing about who I was, or the fact that, maybe she really did want to be there, but she couldn't.
Yeah. Yeah. But we see how if we were to make I'm not important the truth for us, how that can affect us for the rest of our lives. And then you look at, like, as entrepreneurs, how would that affect your life, right? Maybe you're trying to put yourself out there by doing speaking events or creating your own podcast and stuff. And every time you get close to doing it, something goes wrong. You kind of say, yeah, I kind of self-sabotage myself. I freak out. I find ways not to do it. And I get too busy. And you make all these stupid excuses. Sorry, but they are. Why? Because you're not important enough to put your own podcast out there. You're not important enough to get up on stage. That's what we're believing. But we don't say that. It's just like, it's there as this like knowingness, right? And so, again, if all we're doing is buying a book on the 7 secrets of better speeches or how to create your own podcast, but what's in the background is this knowingness of I'm not important enough to have my own podcast, are you ever going to do it? No, right? So I think this is a powerful place to start. And when we're ultimately talking about mindset, when we're ultimately talking about this inner game and creating, success from the inside out, this is what we're talking about. This is exactly what we're talking about. And we all have this. I'm not immune to this. Obviously, Phoebe has shared an example. She's not immune to it. We all have this, and we all work this. But to avoid this, to think this isn't important, to think, let me get my business up and running first, is backwards to me. It really is. And working with course creators and authors and speakers and coaches, I see this runs rampant because it's all about putting you out there. And people say, well, who am I to be doing this? I feel like a fraud. Am I good enough to do this, right? And it's because there is a belief running in the background as truth. So, Phoebe acknowledged, who's creating the belief? She created that belief. You weren't born with it, right? You created it, which also means that if you created the belief, you are the creator of your life, of your reality. And if you alter your beliefs, you begin to alter your reality. You can change the lens in which you experience life. And that is ultimately all we want to do here on this podcast with you. We'll do it by helping you to identify and uncover and eliminate some of these beliefs, all of these beliefs. We'll do it by pounding you, inundating you with new beliefs and offering new ways, new perspectives, new opportunities to look at the world and experience reality so that you can change your behavior, change your thoughts, and get the results that you want ultimately, right? So, do you create your own reality? I say yes. We create these interpretations, these beliefs about what happens in our life. Then those beliefs show up as the truth for us. It colors our experience, like putting on a different shade of sunglasses. And we see life, we see people, we see ourselves through that lens. And that, therefore, affects the actions we take, the thoughts we think, the behaviors we have, and our attitudes. And ultimately, our lives, our reality. If you want to change your reality, begin by changing your beliefs.
Awesome. Well, I hope that you guys got something from this and that you'll just start to explore your beliefs, your reality, and new possibilities. And we'd love to hear from you if you have any feedback. Just let us know what you think, all of these new possibilities that you're creating in your life. And we will see you on the next episode.
Take care. Are you frustrated that no matter how hard you hustle, no matter how much you get done in a day, you still feel like you have little results to show for it? Do you feel like you're doing everything right, but there's still something missing? Well, what if there was an easier way? What if your business could be fun, effortless, and profitable? Phoebe and I have put together a free audio MP3 for you, compiling the 77 business affirmations for creating success from the inside out. And we want to give it to you absolutely free. This is your chance to rewire your brain for bigger results in your life and your business. To get instant access absolutely free, simply visit 77affirmations.com. That's the number 77affirmations.com.